Chapter 34. Did she want to find Grandine? Wasn't the answer obvious? Although Grandine was a dragon, she had raised Wendy like a mother. She was the most important person to Wendy apart from Noah. Noah had indeed helped Wendy when she was at her most helpless. He occupied a very important position in Wendy's heart, so much so that she almost couldn't leave him. But if Wendy was asked if she wanted to find Grandine, of course she wanted to, didn't she? However, Wendy didn't want to leave Noah either. Even if it was only 3 days, Noah was still very important to Wendy. If Wendy had a choice, she definitely wouldn't want to leave Noah. Otherwise, she wouldn't have stuck to Noah for 3 days. I want to find Grandine. Wendy's delicate body began to tremble in Noah's arms. Even her voice trembled. It was obvious that her emotions were fluctuating greatly. But I don't want to leave Big Brother Noah either. Leaving is only temporary. I won't suddenly disappear like Grandine. If Wendy wants to find me, it'll be very easy. Noah could clearly feel Wendy's heart wavering. He patted her back comfortingly and sighed. I'm a sorcerer in fairy tale, and I'm not old enough to take charge of a guild yet. I can't accompany you all over the world to find Grandine. Originally, I wanted to bring you back to fairy tale and see if my companions in the guild could help. But now, Jalal wants to go all over the world to stop the activation of anima, and you have to go all over the world to find Grandine. Although your goals are different, the process is exactly the same. Noah glanced at the silent Jalal and smiled faintly. If that's the case, why don't you let Jalal help you find Grandine? Isn't that good? Wendy buried her little face in Noah's arms. She didn't say a word, but her delicate body kept trembling. It was obvious that she was still wavering. Is that okay? Jalal asked with a hint of worry. Although what you said is not unreasonable, if we really encounter anima on the journey, it'll be too dangerous for Wendy to follow me. So, to be honest, I don't agree. I believe you can take good care of Wendy. Noah met Jalal's gaze and stared at him closely. Can you promise me that no matter what the situation is, you'll ensure Wendy's safety? Looking at Noah's eyes that were as deep as the stars, Jalal felt a strong sense of responsibility. He took a deep breath and nodded firmly. I promise, no matter what, I will ensure Wendy's safety. Noah smiled freely and pulled Wendy away from his arms. He watched as she lowered her head, and her expression could not be seen clearly. Then, he patted her head. If you really don't want to, I won't force you. Come with me to fairy tale. I'll definitely help you find Grandine. Wendy bit her lips. Her eyes were still filled with hesitation. To be honest, Wendy really didn't want to leave Noah. She was very tempted by Noah's suggestion. However, Wendy asked herself, was this really okay? Wendy believed that if she asked Noah for help, Noah would definitely do his best to help her find Grandine. However, it was because she trusted Noah so much and cared so much about him that Wendy didn't want to cause trouble for Noah. Wendy raised her head. First, she looked at Noah, who had a gentle smile on his face. Then, she looked at Jalal beside her. Finally, she fixed her gaze on the fairy tale emblem on the back of Noah's hand. Wendy reached out and held Noah's hand that had the fairy tale emblem on it. After looking at the emblem for a while, she met Noah's gaze. Big Brother Noah, will we meet again? When she said this, Wendy's eyes were filled with reluctance and determination. Noah, who clearly saw all of this, smiled knowingly. Fairy Tale is the most famous guild in the Fiori Kingdom. I believe that even in the future, the name of Fairy Tale will spread across the entire continent. There won't be a single person who doesn't know how to get to Fairy Tale. Noah touched Wendy's soft cheeks and said this with an unbelievably warm tone. If you miss me, come find me at Fairy's Tale. This time, Wendy smiled. Her smile was unusually happy. I'll always miss you, big brother Noah. I believe that Granddiny will also like you. You're both my favorite people. Wendy threw herself into Noah's arms and hugged Noah tightly again. However, this time, Wendy's strength was less sorrowful and more sentimental. Hugging Wendy's small body, Noah raised his head and said solemnly to Jalal, "I'll leave Wendy to you." Jalal nodded, and the emotion in his eyes was sincere. "I'll do my best." In the forest under the sun, the roars of beasts echoed everywhere, adding a dangerous atmosphere to the hot air. Noah, who was carrying a long cloth bag in one hand and slinging it over his left shoulder, was running in the forest at an extremely fast speed. He was like a cheetah that was dashing wildly in the forest. His speed was so fast that one could only see an afterimage as he nimbly dodged the trees that blocked his path. It was very astonishing. Even under such circumstances, Noah still diverted some of his attention to observe his surroundings and carefully listen to the sounds around him. He didn't miss any signs of movement. According to the villagers who were hunting in the forest, they once saw Mila, Elfman, and Lisanna noisily passing by as if they were looking for something. In other words, it was very likely that the Strauss siblings were still wandering around this area. Noah couldn't help but curse in his heart. Noah thought that the Strauss siblings had already known that he had completed the mission and had given up and left in the past 3 days. He didn't expect them to still be in the forest. It seemed that they hadn't given up on snatching the mission from Noah. Needless to say, the Strauss siblings hadn't gone out since they entered the forest 3 days ago. Chapter 35. Roar. When Noah heard that loud roar once more, the owner of the roar finally entered Noah's eyes. Noah, who was charging forward at an extremely fast speed, clearly saw a 3-meter-tall giant with the head of a cow and the body of a human. It walked upright, holding a thick tree trunk in one hand and a screaming child in the other as it raised its head and roared. In front of the giant, there was a white-haired man and a woman. One of them was sitting on the ground, his face filled with horror, while the other was standing there, facing the giant with an anxious look on her face. The child who was being held by the giant and screaming was Lisanna. The one sitting on the ground with a face full of horror was Elfman. The one facing the giant was Mira, who was gnashing her teeth anxiously. As for the giant, it was an existence Noah was very familiar with. It was a very famous and ferocious demonic creature that had no rationality at all. In the forest of Magnoria, Noah had encountered these ferocious monsters more than once under the leadership of some sorcerers from the fairy's tale. Those were monsters that even ordinary sorcerers were extremely afraid of. Why would such a monster appear in a forest with only ferocious beasts? This was a question that Noah had no way of finding out the answer to, and he wasn't interested in finding out either. Roar! Sister Mira! Lisanna! The giant's roar, Lisanna's scream, and Myra's sorrowful cry rang out at almost the same time, causing Noah's starry eyes to slowly shrink as he increased his speed to the maximum. But even so, it would still take some time for Noah to reach the Strauss siblings and the gigantic bull-like figure. During this time, as long as the giant tightened its grip on Lisanna's hand, the cute little girl would be crushed to pieces and die tragically on the spot. There was no time. It was too late. Noah's heart began to beat faster. Without hesitation, he grabbed the cloth bag slung over his shoulder and pulled with force. In the next moment, the hilt of Noah's knight's sword poked out of the bag and was tightly grasped by Noah. However, Noah didn't immediately pull out the sword. Instead, he activated the vast amount of mana in his body and channeled it into the knight's sword through his hand. Whang! The knight's sword that had yet to be unsheathed shook in the scabbard and released a dense light. Clang! Mira, who was about to disregard her own life and risk her life to save Lisanna, didn't have time to act. The sound of a sword instantly filled every corner of the scene and turned into an echo that reverberated in the forest. Mira, who was confronting the giant, Lisanna, who was being held by the giant, and Elfman, who was limply lying on the ground, all three saw it. A streak of light. A streak of light suddenly shot out from a corner of the forest like a comet, flashing with dazzling light. The streak of light appeared out of nowhere and flashed past at a speed that made one's eyes blur. Amidst the sound of the air vibrating and exploding, it was like a meteor that fell from the sky and viciously crashed into the giant. Pfft! An extremely clear tearing sound reverberated in the air. What followed was a rain of blood that crazily sprinkled down like rain. The gigantic minotaur didn't even have the time to let out a blood-curdling screech. His 3-meter-tall body was torn open with his waist as the center. The upper and lower halves of the gigantic minotaur were completely separated from each other. The giant bull was cut into 2 halves. Whoosh! Scarlet blood sprinkled down from the sky and turned the scene into a pool of blood. Boom! The giant's upper and lower halves heavily smashed into the ground. Not only did blood splatter everywhere, but there was also a huge sound that caused the ground to tremble slightly. Mira and Elfman stood up in a daze, while Elfman's face was completely filled with fear as he screamed out loud. There was no helping it. The scene before them was simply too bloody. Looking at the blood-red ground in front of him and the huge Tauren who was sliced into 2 halves, Elfman was still screaming in agony. Mira was the first to react. Lisanna. As soon as she said that, another calm voice sounded from the other side. Over here. Mira hurriedly looked over when she heard that voice. On the other side of the giant that was sliced in half, Noah carried the unconscious Lisanna in one hand and held a knight's sword that was as dazzling as ice in the other. He looked at the giant that was sliced in half with a grim expression. Did he use too much strength? Mira finally understood. The person who sliced the giant in half was the same age as her, the youth that she looked down on. Moreover, he used a knight's sword that was more majestic than power. Although she didn't own one, it didn't mean that she hadn't heard of it before. In this world, there were many things that had all sorts of strange abilities and effects. Some were even equivalent to magical weapons. Some called them magic-conducting weapons, while others called them magical weapons. They were truly precious tools. The common point of these magical weapons was that they required the user to provide them with magical energy in order to activate their abilities and effects. The knight's sword in Noah's hand was flowing with magical energy. There was no need to guess that it could only be a magical weapon. The scene of the giant being sliced in half was still replaying in Mira and Elfman's minds. The siblings froze on the spot and couldn't say a word for a long time. On the other side, Noah had the same reaction. Of course, Noah didn't use too much magical energy in a moment of desperation, resulting in him using too much strength and cutting the giant in half. It was because he noticed Mira that he became like this. Chapter 36. It's about time you tell me what's going on, right? Noah's words echoed clearly in the small cave, causing the atmosphere to turn from stifling to heavy. Noah had only thought of his encounter with the Strauss siblings as a chance encounter. Even though he was curious as to why they wanted to steal his job, he didn't intend to get too close to them. But now, Noah realized that he could no longer treat the 3 of them as passers-by. Not because of anything else, but because of the gloominess, sadness, and other emotions on the faces of the 3 Strauss siblings. Big brother Noah. At the side, Lisanna wanted to say something with an anxious expression, but she only had time to call out to Noah before she was interrupted by Mira, who coldly opened her mouth. Lisanna. Lisanna immediately shut her mouth, her anxious expression turning into sadness and even a hint of sorrow. Even Elfman had the same expression. Mira was the only one who no longer looked like a bad girl. Instead, she was as cold as ice. Seeing this, although Noah didn't know what the Strauss siblings were hiding, he understood what they were trying to do. Even though they were still young, Mira, Elfman, and Lisanna, like Alyssa, had painful pasts that they couldn't bear to look back on. Sigh. Noah sighed. His voice was soft, but it echoed in the silent cave and entered the ears of Mira, Elfman, and Lisanna. "Even though I don't know what you're hiding," Noah said as he looked at Myra's hand hidden behind the cloak. "But I think it has something to do with that hand of yours, right?" Mira didn't say anything. Instead, she hid her face under the hood of her cloak, hiding her expression. "Noah," Elfman said hesitantly as he struggled to speak. Aren't you afraid of my sister?" "Big brother Elfman." Lisanna tugged at Elfman's clothes as if she was blaming him for saying such a thing. However, she also looked at Noah with pleading eyes. Plead for what? Begging them not to be afraid of their elder sister? Noah frowned deeply as a thought flashed through his mind. "Don't you know why your sister's hand became like that?" This time, Elfman, Lisanna, and even the silent Mira raised their heads. After being stunned for a moment, their faces lit up. "Big brother Noah." Lisanna didn't care about anything else. She ran directly to Noah's side and held his hand tightly. Her face was anxious, but there was also a trace of hope. "Do you know why Sister Myra's hand became like that?" "That's not quite right." Noah's furrowed brows slowly relaxed as he looked at Mira. Myra's gaze happened to meet his. "Only you know what your sister went through to become like that. However, it seems like you only know a part of it." "A part?" Mira, Elfman, and Lisanna muttered at the same time. "I don't like to know other people's secrets and the things they don't like to talk about." Looking at the three Strauss siblings, Noah seemed to have guessed something and chuckled. "However, if you're willing to share with me, I think I can be a good listener, secret protector, and solver." The three Strauss siblings fell silent. Big sister Mira. Elfman and Lisanna both turned to look at their big sister, hesitating to speak. Seeing this, Mira lowered her head and didn't say anything. It was only when the siblings were getting impatient that she began to speak in a low voice. "There was a very powerful demon in the church in the village we used to live in. Because he caused the villagers to feel fear and despair, I wanted to see if I could destroy him, so I approached the church. Sister Mira was possessed by a demon in order to destroy the demon that brought harm to the village." Perhaps she could hear the emotions in her sister's voice, so she bit her lip and said loudly. "However, everyone in the village regarded my sister, who had destroyed the demon, as a demon and drove us out of the village. Sister didn't do anything wrong at all." Elfman, who was slightly timid, said indignantly. "Undoubtedly, she destroyed the demon, but everyone treated her like that. Everyone is too much." "Enough, Elfman," Myra's emotionless voice sounded once more. "It's useless to say anything now. We can't return to the village anymore." Elfman and Lisanna looked dispirited, and Noah more or less understood what was going on. Noah placed the pouch containing the knight's sword on the wall and stood up. Under the gaze of the three siblings, he squatted in front of Mira and extended his hand. "Give me your hand." Mira frowned. Just as she was about to turn away and ignore Noah, she heard Noah raise his voice. "Give me your hand." The slightly unyielding and indescribably calm voice made Mira recall the scene of the giant being cut in half in the forest. Her eyes trembled slightly, and she couldn't help but extend her hand. Apart from the night he met Wendy, this was the second time Noah had touched the hand of a member of the opposite sex. However, compared to Wendy's cold and tender hand, Myra's hand only gave Noah one feeling. It was coarse. But it couldn't be helped. After all, it wasn't Myra's original hand. He didn't know if it was a crocodile, lizard, or both, but Myra's hand was covered in scales. Her fingers were sharp like the claws of a malicious spirit, and the shape was also abnormally sinister. Coupled with the faint aura of darkness emanating from it, there was no normal person who wouldn't be afraid of such a hand. To plant such a hand on a girl who was adorable in all aspects was not only unworthy, but also extremely cruel. Even Mira wanted to withdraw her hand after regaining her senses. However, Noah held her hand tightly and stroked the sinister scales without a hint of disdain. His actions were abnormally gentle, and Myra's heart, which was shrouded by the trauma of what happened to her, relaxed. Her movements also slowed down. Noah first touched the scales on Myra's hand, using his outstanding sensing ability to sense the dark aura on them. It wasn't until he sensed traces of Myra's mana from the aura that he was finally able to confirm his guess. First of all, I have to tell you that your hand didn't become like this because you were possessed by a demon. This sentence made the hearts of the three Strauss siblings tremble. Really? Lisa couldn't help but stand up and ask with some excitement. In other words, Sister Mira didn't become like this because she was possessed by a demon, right? Then, why did Sister's hand become like this? Elfman hurriedly asked. Do you have a way to help Sister's hand return to its original state? Mira was also staring at Noah. Her eyes were filled with hope and fear at the same time. Help your sister return to its original state. This time, it was Noah's turn to be confused. He looked at Elfman in puzzlement. Is there no way to return this hand to its original state? But when I met you in the inn, wasn't your sister's hand normal? That's the effect of a magic tool, Lisa explained. It's a magic tool that can confuse people's vision. We obtained that tool by chance, but it can only be used once. When we were attacked by that magical creature, Sister Mira removed the tool's effect in order to protect us. Now, we can't use it anymore. Chapter 37. The effect of a magical item. Noah nodded and looked at Mira. In other words, you have no way of controlling your own magic. Magic? Mira, Elfman, and Lisa were stunned. Although I've never seen it before, I've read about it in books, Noah explained slowly as he continued to stroke Myra's sinister arm. In the magic world, there is a kind of magic that can be used to receive the power of animals, monsters, or even magical creatures. It can transform one's own physique into the physique of animals, monsters, or magical creatures. It can reproduce the power of animals, monsters, or magical creatures in one's own body. It is called receiving magic. You're not possessed by a demon. Noah met Myra's gaze. You must have accidentally received the power of the evil demons in the church of your village, and thus awakened the receiving magic. Awakened. Bewilderment was written all over the faces of the Strauss siblings. If a human wants to learn magic, there are two ways. Noah nodded. One is to learn the magic that one likes through independent learning, and thus become a magic shooter who can use that magic. The other is through independent awakening. Everything in the world has a type of chi, called magic, flowing through their bodies. That's what determines whether a person can use magic or not. Noah explained patiently. And in every person's body, there's a type of magic that can best reflect them. There's a certain chance of self-awakening under certain circumstances. In Myra's case, she should have awakened receiving magic on her own when she came into contact with a demon from the church and obtained the demon's power. That's why she became like this. Elfman and Lisa didn't know much, but they knew that their sister wasn't really possessed by a demon. Although they didn't say anything, their faces were brimming with excitement. As for Mira, her eyes dimmed even more. Demons, power. Mira said mockingly as she looked at her sinister arm that resembled a demon's. This kind of power. I don't need it. The cave that had more or less regained some liveliness immediately fell into a strange silence. The atmosphere was once again oppressive. Noah narrowed his eyes and smiled indifferently. Why? Isn't it a good thing to have power? A good thing. Mira tightened her grip on Noah's hand, a trace of hatred appearing in her eyes. Because of this power, I'm no longer human. How is that a good thing? Sister Mira. Elfman and Lisa both had pained expressions on their faces. Being chased out of the village with Mira, and then wandering around with Mira without a fixed place to stay. One could imagine the hardships and pain they had gone through. Elfman and Lisanna were very clear how difficult it was for Mira. After all, the reason why she had such painful memories was because she had obtained the demon's power. Under such circumstances, how could Mira not be disgusted with herself for having such power? That was why, even though she knew that she wasn't possessed by a demon, she still couldn't let it go. Elfman and Lisanna didn't know what to say about that. They could only worry in their hearts. Not human. Noah gazed at Mira as though he could see through all her thoughts. After a while, he released his hand that was stroking Mira's ferocious demon arm. So according to what you're saying, everyone who can use magic is no longer human. Mira did not notice that Noah's gaze, which was enough to see through people's hearts, was on her body. Her delicate face was filled with extreme sarcasm. That's not what I meant, that's exactly what you meant. Before Mira could finish her sarcastic words, Noah's sudden words mercilessly shut her up. At least, in my opinion, you don't have any reason to hate yourself for having power, nor do you have any reason to resent the power you have. You're just deceiving yourself, throwing a tantrum, and being willful. What? What did you say? As expected, Mira's expression changed because of Noah's merciless words. The negative emotions that had accumulated in her heart for a long time were all detonated by Noah's words. You don't know anything at all. What right do you have to say that? Sister Mira. Seeing Mira's angry expression, Elfman and Lisanna were shocked. They seemed to want to go up and comfort her, but they were stopped by Noah. You're the one who doesn't know anything. Noah looked at Mira with an intense gaze. If I were you, I wouldn't hate this power. Instead, I'd be grateful for it. Otherwise, you wouldn't even have the right to protect your family in front of that giant magical creature. The anger on Mira's face froze in an instant. I don't know what kind of cruel treatment you received in your village. I also don't know how difficult your life was after you left the village, Noah said calmly. But I know what it feels like to hate your own power. At this point, Noah couldn't help but recall the time when he was first adopted by Makarov and joined Fairy's Tale. Although our experiences are different, I'm similar to you. There's a powerful force in my body that I can't control. This force almost brought unimaginable disaster to my family and friends more than once. So, one day, I suddenly thought, why do I have to have this kind of power? Wouldn't it be great if I didn't hate this extra power? Noah looked directly at the stunned Mira. However, just as I was thinking about it, my grandfather said that there's nothing wrong with having power, and there's no reason for people to hate people who have power. However, if you use your power in a way that makes people hate you, that's the real mistake. Since that day, I've never hated the fact that I have power, because I'll never use my power for something that people hate. Chapter 38. This is delicious, Brother Elfman, don't eat so fast. But it's really delicious. Really. Water. Water. Seeing Elfman choking and Lisanna panicking, Noah couldn't help but facepalm. At daybreak, Noah, the Strauss siblings returned to the nearby village and returned to the inn. A day later, Wendy had left the village with Jalal and embarked on a journey to find Grandine and stop the activation of anima. After 3 to 4 days of living in the wild, the Strauss siblings finally returned to a place with people. However, what surprised Noah was that the Strauss siblings didn't have the money to stay in the inn, nor did they have the money to eat. That was to be expected. Before the Strauss siblings were driven out of the village, they weren't rich. The three of them depended on each other for survival. During this period of time, they had already spent all the money they had brought out from home. It was precisely because of this that when the Strauss siblings heard that the village had issued a commission to expel the ghosts in the nearby forest, they gave the magical item to Mira to use to hide the demon's arm and came to the village to accept the commission to earn some living expenses and travel expenses. Who would have thought that when the Strauss siblings were ready, they would come to the village and find the village chief, only to be told by the village chief that someone had already accepted the job. Only then did the Strauss siblings come to the village to look for trouble and snatch the job. It was no wonder that the Strauss siblings were so stubborn about the commission, to the point that they searched for Noah in the forest for 3 days and still weren't willing to return. If they couldn't snatch the commission, the Strauss siblings wouldn't even be able to afford a meal. That would be terrible. Of course, after knowing the beginning of the matter, Noah didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, he didn't gossip because of this and simply ordered a table of dishes for the Strauss siblings, who had been eating wild game in the forest for several days, to have a good meal. After returning to the village chief sent someone to inform Noah that he had already acknowledged that Noah had completed the commission they issued and gave him all the compensation of 200,000 J in one go. In addition to the 1 million J he had left behind for activating the ritual lake, while Noah didn't bring it all with him, treating others to a good meal wasn't a problem. He wouldn't be stingy to the point of leaving someone in the lurch. However, if possible, Noah still hoped that Elfman could restrain himself and eat a little quietly. Noah glanced at Mira, who was sitting at the side with a cloak covering her body. She was eating silently with only one hand stretched out, and Noah was not used to it. "Last time, you rushed over like a delinquent girl and threatened to snatch my job. This time, you're so obedient." How unsettling. Mira continued to eat silently, seemingly not hearing Noah's muttering. On the other hand, Lisanna, who was sitting further away from Noah, heard a little. She secretly observed Mira, then moved closer to Noah's ear and said, "Actually, ever since she was possessed by a demon." "No, since she received the power of a demon and awakened her magic, Sister Mira has never smiled or talked much. She was so rude last time because she wanted to appear strong in front of outsiders and protect us," Linley said. "Is that so?" Noah smiled and nodded without batting an eyelid. His words were not as secretive as Lisanna's. "I think demons definitely don't have such a delicate side. Only humans would change themselves for their family." Mira, who was eating, paused for a moment, then recovered and continued eating as if nothing had happened. Lisanna nodded gratefully at Noah, then turned her gaze to Elfman, who was wolfing down his food. Her expression immediately became angry, and she started arguing with Elfman. The entire meal basically went into Elfman's stomach. Only the sound of Elfman eating, Lisanna's curious questioning of Noah, Noah's occasional conversation, and Myra's silence could be heard. "Since you're full, what plans do you have for the future?" Noah took a sip of his drink and looked at the Strauss siblings. "You don't have any extra money, right? You can't go on like this, right?" "This." Lisanna and Elfman looked at each other, and Myra's eyes flickered slightly. It was clear that the Strauss siblings didn't have any good plans at the moment. Noah tapped the table rhythmically, his gaze sweeping past Mira, Elfman, and Lisanna. After a while, the corner of his mouth curled up. "How about it? Do you want to try fairy tale? Go to fairy tale." Not to mention Lisanna and Elfman, even Mira was clearly moved for a moment. It had to be said that the Magic Guide Guild really was a good place for the Strauss siblings. Mira, Elfman, and Lisanna didn't have a fixed residence, and apart from each other, they had no one else to rely on. If they wanted to survive, they had to have a stable income. However, even if the Strauss siblings wanted to work and earn money, age was a huge issue. Ordinary jobs wouldn't consider hiring children at all. Otherwise, the Strauss siblings wouldn't have to suffer so much. The Magic Guide Guild, on the other hand, didn't care so much. As long as they were able to use magic and had a certain level of strength, they would be able to complete the corresponding tasks and receive remuneration. Moreover, the remuneration was much better than ordinary jobs. Mira was able to receive magic and receive the power of a demon. Being able to face off against a huge monster showed that her strength was definitely not a problem. Joining the Magic Guide Guild definitely wouldn't be a problem. The problem was that Elfman and Lisanna hadn't learned magic and were just ordinary children. Chapter 39. In his days, Noah realized that he was in a very inconceivable place. This was a place that was as vast as the sky, but also as if he could reach out and touch the boundaries of space. It was as light as water, as elegant as floating in the clouds. It was a very wonderful place. The sky was white. The ground was white. Everything that appeared in front of Noah's eyes was white. A vast expanse of whiteness, but it gave Noah a warm feeling. That feeling was as if he had returned to his mother's body, and was in the amniotic fluid. It was very wonderful. Undoubtedly, there was nothing here, but Noah did not feel lonely, did not feel lost, did not feel cold in his heart, and instead felt warm. If this could not be called wonderful, then what could be called wonderful? However, in this vast expanse of whiteness, it was not that there was nothing. Other than Noah, in this world, there were other wonderful existences. Feathers that fell from the sky, feathers that were suspended in bubbles that fell from the sky, feathers that were covered and shrouded in white halos that were suspended in bubbles that fell from the sky. If it was said that this world gave Noah a warm feeling as if he had returned to his mother's body, then these feathers that were falling from the sky, emitting a faint light, gave Noah another kind of warmth that was similar yet not quite the same. How should he describe it? If he had to give an example, then it would be like family. Yes. Noah could be sure that these unbelievable feathers in front of him seemed to be his family. Thus, looking at the feathers that were falling from the sky, suspended in bubbles, hovering in the air, emitting a white halo, Noah revealed a smile of joy from the bottom of his heart. However, in the next second, a brand new scene appeared in front of Noah's eyes, causing the smile on Noah's face to completely disappear. A new family descended from the sky. They were still the same feathers that were suspended in bubbles. However, these feathers not only lost their bright white halo, but also became fragmented, as if they had been broken, and did not have the vitality that they should have had. Following that, the feathers that had lost their vitality replaced the intact feathers and floated in front of Noah, gathered around Noah, and floated back and forth. It looked as if they were asking for help, Brother Noah. Brother Noah, a sweet and tender familiar voice gently echoed in Noah's ears. At the same time, Noah also felt that his body was constantly being shaken. The sleepy Noah woke up from his dazed state. He slowly opened his eyes, and stared blankly at the source of the voice. What entered Noah's eyes was an extremely cute little girl. She was around 11 or 12 years old, and wore a cute red dress. She had short white hair that was as clean as snow, and although her face was small, it was very delicate and cute. It was not difficult to imagine the beauty that the owner of this face would have when she grew up. Facing such an incomparably cute face, Noah's eyes still did not focus, and he could only blankly mumble. Lisanna. It's Lisanna. Brother Noah. Lisanna's pretty face had a worried expression. Just as Noah was about to wonder why she had such an expression, Lisanna reached out her hand and touched Noah's cheek, wetting her hand. Wait a minute, wetting. Only then did Noah realize that he did not know when, but tears had actually flowed out of his eyes, wetting his cheeks. I am crying. Brother Noah. Lisanna helped Noah wipe away the tears on his face as she spoke worriedly. Did you have that dream again? Hearing this, Noah could not help but smile helplessly. Yes. This was not the first time Noah had experienced the white dream in his sleep. Or rather, ever since Noah had gained his own consciousness, the first scene, dream, and memory that Noah experienced was that white dream. Even meeting Makarov was after that dream. Since then, Noah would have that strange dream every once in a while, experiencing the warmth of the dream and the sadness of the dream's end. That was the kind of heartbreak and grief that would only be felt by those broken feathers in the dream. Thus, whenever Noah had that dream and woke up from it, the sadness would cause Noah to shed tears that he had never shed for anything else. Only Lisanna, who had overbearingly snatched Gray's job ever since she joined Fairy Tale, would know about this matter. She would wake Gray up every day. Apart from Lisanna, even Noah's grandfather, Makarov, didn't know about this, let alone Gray, who came to wake him up every day but never entered the room before Noah woke up. Even Lisanna had only discovered it when she snuck into Noah's room in the morning to play a prank on him while Noah was still asleep. Seeing the pained look in her beautiful eyes, Noah revealed a rather steady smile and patted her head. "Why are you showing such an expression?" Lisanna said in a somewhat awkward manner. "Whenever I think of Big Brother Noah having such sad dreams, I feel uncomfortable. How many times have I told you that it's not a sad dream? It's just that the feeling it gives is very strange and inexplicable. It affects my emotions quite a bit." Noah smiled bitterly and crawled out of the blanket, sitting up and stretching. "You're still young, why are you so emotional?" "It's because Big Brother Noah is too slow and doesn't understand a girl's heart." Lisanna puffed up her cheeks and pulled Noah up from the bed. "All right, Big Brother Noah, hurry up and get up. Almost everyone in the guild is here and you're still sleeping in." Yes. Noah couldn't do anything about the carefree Lisanna. He allowed her to look for clothes for him and rush him to wash up like a worried sister. Chapter 40. The moment the loud collision sounded, everyone in the guild turned their gazes in the direction of the sound. When they saw Naz and Gray lying on the ground with a bump on their heads and circles around their eyes, everyone immediately retracted their gazes as if nothing had happened and started talking to each other. It couldn't be helped. This kind of scene happened almost every day in the guild, and the sorcerers in the guild had long been used to it. Not to mention the sorcerers in the guild, even Noah himself was used to it. He just habitually sighed and greeted as if nothing had happened. "Good morning. Good morning." The other members of the guild began to greet him one after another. "Good morning, Noah and Lisanna." In the crowd, 3 girls of the same age as Noah also came over. One of them was wearing a cold armor with a plain dress inside. Another one was wearing a revealing leather outfit like a delinquent girl. Another one was wearing a simple plaid dress with her long black hair tied into a ponytail. The one wearing the cold armor was naturally Alusha. The one wearing the revealing leather outfit was Mira. As for the one with the long black hair tied into a ponytail, she was called Kana. Kana Alberona was a person who joined Fairy Tale earlier than Noah, Alusha and even Gray. "You really don't learn your lesson every day." Alusha put her hands on her waist and looked at Naz and Gray on the ground, criticizing them seriously. "If you want to defeat Noah, you should at least be more prepared. Rushing up like this is just a sneak attack. Even if you win, it doesn't count as strength." Alusha. Naz's whole body trembled as he clutched the bump on his head with a teary look. "Don't stop me, I must defeat Noah today. This way, I can prove that I am stronger than Gray." "Who are you saying is stronger than me?" Gray also clutched the bump on his head and curled his lips in disdain. "The one who defeated Noah will definitely be me. It's impossible for a stinky flame like you to do that. But you were knocked down by Noah in an instant." Kana glanced at Gray, who was only wearing a pair of shorts, and said in distress. "Also, Gray, where are your clothes?" "Oh no." Gray was shocked. "By the way, Noah, did you ask Lisanna to wake you up again?" Mira couldn't help but feel annoyed when she saw the smiling Lisanna hiding beside Noah. "Don't order my sister around like a servant. It's just Noah. First of all, I didn't ask her to wake me up. She came on her own accord." Noah rubbed his aching glabella. "Secondly, Mira, what's up with that insignificant Noah? Noah is very strong." Alusha retorted. "Mira, are you insulting Noah?" Tisk, Mira crossed her arms and said disdainfully. What does it have to do with you? What a tough woman. Alusha's forehead was instantly imprinted with the word, "Whoa." She looked at Mira with a fake smile. Are you insulting me? A woman who shows her belly button. You want to fight? Mira laughed nastily and raised her fingers. Just in time. Today, I must teach you a lesson, you ice-cold guy. Oh. Alusha's face was filled with murderous intent. If you think you can do it, then come and try. Suddenly, the two girls' gazes seemed to have turned into solid electricity and collided fiercely. Their bodies emitted a demonic aura that sent chills down one's spine. So scary. Naz and Gray hugged each other without any backbone. It can't be. Kana also took a few steps back. Are they going to fight again? This isn't called a fight, it's called causing trouble. Noah found that his head was getting more and more painful. Why do these two people dislike each other? Isn't this good? Lisanna looked at Mira, who was entangled with Alusha, with a gentle gaze. Compared to the old Mira, the current Mira is much more cheerful, isn't she? When they first arrived at Fairy's Tale, Mira was basically the same as the old Alusha. She didn't talk to others and never smiled. She only hid in a corner with a cloak, as if her existence was dispensable. However, later on, as Lisanna and Elfman learned receiving magic, Mira finally gradually accepted the power of the demon in her body and was no longer so isolated. Moreover, as Mira familiarized herself with receiving magic, her demonized arm also returned to its original state. Not long after, Mira became an out-and-out delinquent girl, just like when she first met Noah. Unfortunately, perhaps because Noah had told Mira and Alusha in private that they behaved very similarly when they first joined the guild, the two began to dislike each other. As a result, the second pair of enemies in Fairy's Tale was born. By the way, the first pair was Naz and Gray. Noah's expression eased a lot, but his headache didn't lessen at all. Isn't this too cheerful? Ahahaha. Lisanna laughed. Really? Undoubtedly, Mira is very gentle, but she doesn't want to show it. She's always pretending to be strong. Won't she not be able to get a boyfriend like that? Although whether or not she's gentle has yet to be verified, isn't it too early to think about getting a boyfriend? Noah was a little embarrassed. Mira is only 13 like me, right? You're already thinking about such things at the age of 13. That's how girls are. Lisanna raised her head slightly and met Noah's gaze. Her gaze became as clear as the surface of a lake, swaying gently. Actually, 11-year-old girls are the same, brother Noah. Noah felt a little uneasy and panicked for some reason. He couldn't help but look away. You're right. You're right. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. However, at this moment, Noah suddenly felt a tender little hand squeezing into his hand and clasping his hand tightly. Noah was shocked and subconsciously looked in Lisanna's direction again. Lisanna still raised her head and looked at Noah with eyes full of enthusiasm. Chapter 41. Magnolia, Forest Riverbank, Clang. In the sound of metal clashing against metal, the two figures holding different knight swords separated from each other and retreated rapidly. It wasn't until they were some distance away from each other that they finally stabilized themselves and stopped retreating. Huff, 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 Noah and Alusha looked at each other with eyes full of fighting spirit. After calming their breathing slightly, the corners of their mouths rose at the same time. You've become stronger than before, Alusha. The same goes for you, Noah. As if they were rivals, Noah and Alusha both let out a sigh of relief at the same time. Then, a new fighting spirit appeared in their eyes. Again. Again. After a short conversation, the man and woman, who were the best companions and also the best opponents, once again raised their swords and got ready for a charge. Unfortunately, before Noah and Elisha had the time to perform the follow-up of this action, a voice sounded beside them. "All right. Stop here." Mira stood up and glared at Elisha. "Are you trying to prolong the battle without permission again? It's my turn now. Sister Mira." Lisanna, who was sitting beside Mira, complained. "Why do you have to time it so accurately? Isn't it better to let brother Noah and Elisha continue their relationship?" "Not at all," Mira said bluntly. "If they continue to fight, won't it mean that Elisha will have more time to train? What if she becomes stronger than me? Sister Mira, aren't you being too calculative?" Lisanna puffed up her cheeks. "Brother Noah, Elisha, and sister, you three are the strongest among us. You're also the only magic shooters who are allowed to work outside of Magnolia. Naz, Gray, Karna, and Brother Elv are only allowed to work in Magnolia. What's there to be unhappy about?" "Of course not," Mira said matter-of-factly. "No matter who I lose to, I can't lose to Elisha and Noah. I can't let him climb over my head." Sister Mira. Lisanna sighed. "You really," in the center of the field, Noah and Elisha, who were maintaining their charging posture, looked at each other helplessly. After Mira's interference, the state that the two of them had worked so hard to get into was successfully broken. Mira must have seen this point and stopped them on time, right? With no other choice, Noah and Elisha could only sulkily put away their knight swords and let their bodies rest after a whole morning of training. Originally, this place was a secret place that only Noah and Elisha knew about. Unless it was Noah and Elisha leading the way, the chances of discovering this place by chance were not very high. The reason why Mira was here was very simple. What? Elisha wants to train. I definitely won't allow her to secretly get stronger. This was the second day after Mira and Elisha officially started fighting. When Mira saw Noah and Elisha planning to train at the forest bank, she immediately shouted those words. Thus, Mira became one of the users of this secret place. As for Lisanna, the reason was even simpler. If big brother Noah and sister Mira are going, then I want to go too. Thus, she became a frequent visitor of this secret place as a bystander. In fact, Naz and Gray wanted to follow as well. In the end, Elisha, who was in a bad mood because Mira had interrupted her training, glared at them and announced their withdrawal. It seemed that the powerful and occasionally violent Elisha had completely become the nemesis of Naz and Gray, the devil in their hearts. Now, Noah, Mira, and Elisha would gather here almost every day when they weren't working. Occasionally, they would meet in pairs to train and hone their strength. Originally, Elisha was very dissatisfied with Mira coming along. However, after Mira had completely familiarized herself with receive magic, her strength had improved rapidly. It didn't take long for Makarov to approve of her and allow her to go out to work. Now, among the children of the same age group in Fairy Tale, Noah, Mira, and Elisha had impressively become existences like leaders. They were the three strongest children of their age. Even some of the weaker magi in the guild weren't a match for the three of them, causing the magi in the guild to sigh in admiration. It was also because of this that Mira and Elisha became more and more incompatible. They were constantly thinking about how to determine victory and defeat. Even the innocent Noah was dragged into it, just to prove that they were the strongest of the three. In fact, if the three of them were to go all out, their strength should be considered to be on par. It would be very difficult to determine victory and defeat. Of course, Mira and Elisha both knew that the so-called on par was only if Noah didn't use his trump card, even if he used the magical effects of his knight's sword. Up until now, the two girls knew that Noah's knight's sword was a magical weapon. However, as for what kind of abilities and magical effects it had, only Noah and Makarov, the original owner, knew. Speaking of which, Brother Noah, Sister Mira, Alusha, aren't you going out to work? Lisanna tilted her head. I remember that you haven't gone out to work for a month. What's wrong? Mira furrowed her brows. Is our living expenses not enough? If we don't have any additional expenses, let me calculate. Lisanna cutely raised her fingers. We should be able to last for another month. Is that so? Mira thought for a moment and nodded. Then let's go out to work in a few days. I'm not in a hurry for the time being. Alusha shook her head. Even though I really want to save up to buy a magical weapon, I'm still looking for one. So, I'll wait a few more days. Mira, Lisanna, and Alusha turned their gazes to Noah at the same time, their eyes full of questions. Me? Noah's face had a rare expression of joy and excitement. I probably won't be going out to work in the near future. Hearing that, the three girls present were slightly taken aback. Noah grinned and didn't explain. He took out a handful of pitch-black pearls from his backpack and tossed them into the sky. Whing! Vast magical power was like a rolling wave, surging up violently and spreading out fiercely, sweeping across the pitch-black pearls that were falling from the sky. Suddenly, the outlines of all the pitch-black beads were covered with a circle of dim light, causing the pitch-black beads that were falling from the sky to stop in midair. Then, the pearls began to dance. It was a scene that could only be described as dancing. Like a comet orbiting a satellite, the pearls, driven by the dense magical power, drew circles around Noah's body. Sometimes they spun up, sometimes they wandered left and right, sometimes they sped up, sometimes they jumped nimbly, constantly flashing through the air. After a long while, Noah stretched out his hand, and the pearls that were drawing beautiful circles around him immediately lined up like bees returning to their hive, falling into Noah's hand in an orderly manner until they all returned to Noah's palm. Noah slowly put away the pearls in his hand. On the other hand, Mira, Lisanna, and Alyssa were completely dumbfounded. Big Brother Noah. Lisanna said in a daze. It was impossible for Mira and Lisanna, who had joined Fairy's Tale, not to mention Alusha, not to mention that Noah had yet to learn magic because he couldn't control it completely. Hence, the three of them were well aware of what it meant to be able to control the pitch-black beads so beautifully just like a dance. It was a scene that had reached a godly level of control over mana. In front of the three of them, Noah laughed, and laughed very happily. Chapter 42. In the Fairy Tale Guild, there was a very large library. It was a bookshelf that could hold 10 20-meter-tall bookshelves. There were countless thick and heavy books on it. It was a very, very large library. In this library, there were all the requests that Fairy's Tale had received, the related magic, the necessary knowledge, and so on since the establishment of Fairy's Tale. Rather than a library, it was more like a database. Occasionally, there would be some ancient documents or books that the guild members had obtained from the outside world. Basically, as long as it was related to the world of magic, apart from some of the most confidential information, one would be able to find relevant records in the library. Of course, there were also some common magic books that recorded the method to learn certain spells. Today, Noah planned to stay in the library for the whole night. He even planned to stay for a while to look for books that recorded magic knowledge. Thus, when the sky was about to turn dark and the guild members had all left the guild, Noah stood at the entrance of the guild. He was about to send off Mira, Lisanna, and Alusha, who had accompanied him for the whole day. Big Brother Noah, do you really not need my help? Lisanna puffed up her cheeks, seemingly a little unhappy. The library is so big. It'll be very difficult for you to look for magic books alone. I've been to the library before when I was learning Receive Magic. Wouldn't it be better for me to help you? If that's the case, are you not going to sleep tonight? Noah shrugged. I'm planning to be busy all night, so it's best if you don't accompany me. I don't care. Lisanna started nagging, but she wasn't confident that she could accompany Noah for the whole night. She could only mumble a few words. Although I'm not interested in staying with you all night, I'm quite curious about which spell you want to learn, Mira said awkwardly as she crossed her arms and turned her head away. If you beg me, I can reluctantly accompany you. To be honest, I'm also quite curious about which spell you want to learn. Alusha also looked at Noah. You really don't need our help. I appreciate your kindness. Noah thought for a while and shook his head. Tonight, I just want to see if there's any spell I like. I might not be able to learn anything in one night. If you're really curious, it won't be too late to help me tomorrow. I see. Alusha thought for a while and nodded. Then there's no other way. I hope you'll be able to learn something tonight. Lisanna seemed like she still wanted to say something, but she was stopped by Mira. Since others don't want us to meddle in other people's business, why should we stick to them? Mira snorted coldly. She pulled Lisanna's hand and walked out. Come on, let's go home and let that man be stubborn. Wait. Wait. Sister Mira. Noah scratched his cheek and asked Alyssa with a perplexed expression. What's the matter? Mira asked as she left with Lisanna and her grumbling. What's the matter? Did I offend her again? She just wants to help you, but she can't bring herself to do it. That's just how stubborn she is. Alusha didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She then walked in the direction of her own residence. Then I'll be heading back too. See you tomorrow. Noah nodded silently. He watched as the three of them left. When they were out of sight, he turned around and returned to the interior of the guild. He then walked in the direction of the library. After almost 2 years, Noah had finally trained his mana control to the point of perfection. He had completely controlled the unparalleled mana in his body. Noah clenched his fist that was filled with a sense of strength, and could not help but feel an indescribable sense of excitement when he sensed the mana that was surging in his body like stormy waves, but did not leak out of his body at all. It couldn't be helped. Noah had been waiting for this day for a long time. As long as he could freely control his own mana, Noah would be able to learn magic. In other words, Noah could finally officially embark on the path of learning magic and begin his journey towards becoming a true archmage. Once Noah learned magic, his strength would improve by leaps and bounds. He had spent 2 years of hard training to be able to control the powerful magic power freely in his body. When that time came, surpassing Mira and Alusha, who had always been on par with Noah in terms of strength, would definitely not be a dream. If all went well, he would even be able to surpass the person who had always looked down on Noah and was dissatisfied with Noah. The image of the lightning magic user who had the same special magic power as Naz, blonde hair, sharp eyes, and arrogant expression appeared in Noah's mind. The excitement in Noah's heart turned into determination as he quickened his pace and continued to walk toward the library. After walking for about 5 minutes, Noah climbed over the bar on the first floor of the guild and saw the entrance to the fairy tale library. However, the moment he saw the entrance, Noah stopped in his tracks. A surprised expression appeared on his face. He's here. He saw Makarov sitting cross-legged on a box beside the entrance of the fairy tale library. It was rare that he didn't have the wine cup or crutches in his hands. He also didn't wear the clown-like clothes. Instead, he wore a luxurious robe with sacred patterns on it. It was believed that as long as one was in the magic world, 99% of them wouldn't be able to recognize this luxurious robe. That was a robe that only the 10 most outstanding and righteous archmages on the continent, the 10 great saint archmages, could possess. Usually, Makarov would only wear this luxurious robe on very formal occasions, representing his status as one of the 10 saints. Now, Makarov was wearing this robe that represented the 10 great holy magicians. One could imagine how much importance Makarov attached to what he was going to do next. Seeing Noah's extremely surprised expression, Makarov grinned. His eyes seemed to be able to see through everything, containing an indescribable radiance. Have we finally reached this step? Grandfather. Noah hesitated for a moment before speaking in an uncertain tone. Don't tell me you already know. If you're referring to the matter of you completely controlling your mana, then I do know. Makarov's face was full of affection. After all, I've seen your hard work in training every day. You've never once lost sight of it. This sentence was like a warm current that drilled into Noah's heart. It turned out that Makarov had always been secretly watching over him, taking care of him without a moment of stagnation. Noah took a deep breath, walked in front of Makarov, and looked him in the eye as he said, "Don't worry. Grandfather, do you have something important to say to me?" Something important. Makarov narrowed his eyes and tilted his head. It's indeed quite important, but I feel that it's time to seriously talk to you. After saying that, Makarov was silent for a moment before speaking. Noah, I know that you've been avoiding your origins all this time. The look in Noah's eyes suddenly became complicated. Indeed. Just like what Makarov said, Noah had actually been intentionally or unintentionally avoiding his origins. Because intuition told Noah that his origins were definitely hiding something that could not be known by others. Chapter 43. For those who knew Noah, Noah was just an orphan who was accidentally adopted by Makarov. However, even Makarov didn't know that Noah was definitely not just an orphan. Noah didn't have the memory of his previous existence at all. When he first met Makarov, Noah's appearance was already that of a 10-year-old child. He was attacked by monsters in the wild, causing Noah's magic to go berserk, which attracted the attention of Makarov, who happened to pass by nearby. Then he was adopted by Makarov. When he was just adopted by Makarov, Makarov also asked Noah about his life experience, but Noah couldn't say it all. There were two reasons. 1. At that time, Noah still couldn't speak. To be precise, it should be said that at that time, Noah still didn't understand the language of this world. He didn't know how to speak and how to express himself verbally. It was like a newborn baby who had intelligence and a 10-year-old appearance in advance. It was particularly strange. 2. Noah didn't have the memory of his life experience at all. When Noah learned the language and could speak, Makarov, who knew about this matter, said that Noah might have lost his memory. However, Noah knew that Makarov's statement was wrong. Noah didn't lose his memory. Just like what was said above, at that time, Noah was like a baby who had intelligence and a 10-year-old appearance in advance. This wasn't a metaphor, but a real fact. In other words, instead of saying that Noah lost his memory before the age of 10, it was better to say that he lost 10 years of time, as if he was already 10 years old when he was born. Although Noah didn't know why he felt this way, he vaguely knew about this matter. It was as if someone was telling him this fact, but it was too inconceivable. Therefore, Noah didn't mention this matter to anyone. Over time, he even stopped pursuing this matter. In Makarov's words, Noah was running away from his past. Of course, this was something that could not be helped. Makarov had also asked someone to help investigate Noah, but he couldn't find anything. It was as if Noah didn't exist in the past. Not even a trace of him could be found. In addition, Noah vaguely felt that he didn't lose his memory. Instead, he was born with the appearance and intelligence of a 10-year-old. No one would think that Noah was an ordinary person. It was even possible that Noah wasn't a person. Under such circumstances, how could Noah not escape from his origins? He didn't want to be treated like a monster. Seeing all the complicated emotions in Noah's eyes, Makarov sighed. You may have your own difficulties, or you may know something. I won't ask you, and I won't force you. You can escape or give up. No matter what, I just want to say that you are my grandson, Makarov's grandson, and always will be. Grandpa. Noah closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his eyes had regained their usual clarity. I am Noah Doria. I remember this matter very clearly. That's good. Makarov smiled lightly, but then became serious again. This time, what I want to tell you is not about your origins, but about your physique. Physique? Noah was startled. You really didn't notice it? Makarov touched his chin and looked at Noah. Do you remember the first time you entered Magnolia Forest and encountered a snake-shaped monster? Hearing Makarov's words, Noah remembered. When he had just joined Fairy Tale, Noah did not know that there were many powerful monsters in Magnolia Forest. In order to train his magic control, he rashly entered Magnolia Forest and encountered a snake-shaped monster. Noah still remembered that he seemed to have been bitten by the snake and fainted. When he woke up again, he was already sent to Polyusia by Makarov for treatment. After a long period of recuperation, he completely recovered and returned to the guild. Actually, I never told you that after you were bitten by that snake, you were inflicted with a lethal poison and a large number of curses. Makarov's words shocked Noah. This was because Noah clearly remembered that Makarov said that he had only suffered a little injury and did not mention anything about the poison and curses at all. I didn't tell you, not because I wanted to hide it from you, but because your condition at that time was really strange, Makarov said solemnly, as if he had sunk into his memories. Undoubtedly, when I first found you, you had obvious signs of being poisoned and cursed and were on the verge of death. But when I sent you to Polyusia, the poison and curses in your body had all disappeared. The poison and curses disappeared. Noah could not help but touch his body and frown. Could this have something to do with my physique? That's right. Makarov nodded his head heavily. Just in case, I asked Polyusia to do a body check on you. The result was that your physique seemed to be different from ordinary people and had characteristics that ordinary people did not have. First of all, your physique is very exclusive. Makarov extended a finger. Negative energy like poison and curses will not work on you at all. Poisoning you and cursing you will not work on you. Your body can reject all negative energy, such as curses, poisons, weakness caused by external forces, and even methods that have the effect of increasing strength but have side effects will only be left with the effect of increasing strength, and the side effects will be eliminated. Secondly, your physique is very tolerant. Makarov extended a second finger. This tolerance will allow you to absorb some energy that does not originally belong to you but has entered your body. For example, when you were attacked by the snake magic beast, before sending you to Polyusia, I injected a part of my mana into your body. In the end, this mana was completely absorbed by you. Lastly, your physique is very independent. Ignoring Noah's shocked expression, Makarov extended a third finger. Everyone knows that there is magic power in all things in the world, and it circulates among all things. The magic power of a magic shooter comes from this. Once a magic shooter's magic power is depleted, his body will automatically absorb magic essence from the atmosphere to replenish his magic power. But you're not like that. Even if your magic power is depleted, it will automatically recover. You don't need to absorb external power at all. At this point, Makarov muttered in a low voice. This way, it was as if its existence was like an entire world. Shaking his head, Makarov hid the thoughts in the depths of his heart. He looked at the silent Noah. I'm here to tell you this. You'll start learning magic soon, and you'll definitely meet all kinds of opponents in the future. It's absolutely necessary for you to grasp the uniqueness of your body. I hope you'll remember this. Immunity to all negative energy and side effects. Ability to absorb energy that does not belong to you. Ability to automatically recover your mana. These three effects were all demonstrating the extraordinariness of Noah's physique, and also telling Noah. He was indeed not an ordinary person. You are a smart child. I believe that you will be able to overcome all difficulties by yourself. Makarov smiled meaningfully. If you want to learn my magic, I welcome you to look for me at any time. Leaving these words, when Noah raised his head, Makarov had already disappeared. Noah stood in the same spot for a long time. After a long time, he let out a long sigh and patted his cheeks. Let's not think about it for now. Let's solve the problem of my magic first. Looking at the library in front of him, Noah lifted his feet and stepped inside. Chapter 44. Fairy's Tale, the book vault. Rows of bookshelves that were comparable to the size of buildings were neatly arranged in the vast space. Old or new books were neatly arranged on the bookshelves or scattered on the ground. The smell of books lingered in the air. The peaceful atmosphere fluctuated in the space. Under such circumstances, even the violent Mira could not help but lighten her footsteps and tiptoe into the library. Her invasive gaze swept across the space that was filled with books and finally fixed on a table in the middle of all the bookshelves. There, the person Mira was looking for was lying on the table with books piled up beside him. Some of the books were still closed, while others were opened and placed in front of the young man. However, the young man did not even read a single word. Because his eyes were tightly shut, and he looked like he was in a deep sleep. Seeing this, Mira frowned and snorted softly. He said that he was going to fight hard all night, but in the end, he was so tired that he fell asleep. Mira did not know that Noah had learned from Makarov that he was different from ordinary people last night, so he was exhausted and fell asleep. She walked down the stairs and walked in the direction of Noah. Looking down at Noah, who was lying on the table sleeping, Mira stretched out her hand, obviously wanting to slap Noah awake. However, in the next moment, an unexpected scene appeared in front of Mira. Drip. With an extremely soft sound, a drop of sparkling liquid slid down the cheek of Noah, who was sleeping on the table, and splashed onto the table, soaking that area. That was Noah's tear. Mira's eyes that seemed to be filled with fierce and powerful emotions suddenly trembled. She could not help but panic, and for a moment, she did not know what to do. Crying. Noah cried. Why? Mira could not get an answer to this question. At least, she could not get an answer now. However, the scene of Noah crying in his sleep did bring a great shock to Mira. This was the first time Mira saw Noah cry. Before this, Mira's impression of Noah was that he was capable, powerful, and had a stronger will than ordinary people. He had a strong sense of autonomy and was a very gentle person. After all, before he joined Fairy Tale, Noah had saved Mira, Elfman, and Lisanna, who were in danger. He also exposed the truth of Mira being possessed by a demon, and led the three of them into Fairy Tale. To Mira, Noah was an existence that saved her. Most importantly, back then, Noah did not mind caressing Mira's demonic arm that represented trauma and painful memories. This scene was deeply engraved in Mira's heart. Mira could not believe that such a person would have a weak side to him that would shed tears. However, even if she knew that Noah had a weak side that ordinary people did not know about, what could she do? She stared blankly at Noah lying on the table, tears flowing out of his closed eyes from time to time and dripping onto the table. Mira was at a loss for what to do. After a while, she hesitated and reached out with trembling hands to wipe away the tears on Noah's cheeks. As Mira wiped, Noah seemed to feel a little itchy. He wrinkled his nose and adjusted his posture. Mira, who thought that he was going to wake up, was startled. When Noah's clear breathing sound entered her ears again, Mira heaved a sigh of relief. At this time, Noah's eyes were no longer tearing up. It was as if he had been disturbed and the dream had changed. His expression was unusually peaceful. Looking at Noah's peaceful sleeping face, Mira continued to wipe Noah's cheeks with her hands. Or rather, she was caressing Noah's cheeks. Her hands were no longer trembling, and she was no longer afraid. Instead, she was reluctant to part with it. Could it be that the reason she insists on waking him up every day is to see such a sleeping face? Mira muttered to herself. She could not help but reveal her inner thoughts. This is really sly. As she said that, Mira began to stare at Noah's sleeping face. She seemed to have thought of something. First, she smiled. Her smile was unprecedentedly sweet. Then, her cheeks turned red. She sneakily looked around and glanced at Noah's sleeping face. She actually swallowed a mouthful of saliva. If it's just for a while, it shouldn't be a problem, right? Myra's cheeks grew redder and redder as she said those words. Finally, as if she had mustered up some courage, she bent down in Noah's direction. At this time, Myra's eyes were like ripples in water. They were abnormally blurry. Myra's delicate and cute face was also inching closer to Noah's peaceful sleeping face, causing a pink atmosphere to reverberate in the air. Chirp. Although it was soft, because of the quiet environment, it was unusually clear. Myra's tender lips finally came into contact with Noah's lips, causing the pink atmosphere to become a little warmer, and the atmosphere became a little hot. Ugh. After an unknown amount of time, Mira reluctantly let go of Noah's lips. She straightened her body and stroked her mouth with one hand. Her cheeks were incomparably red, her eyes were blurred, and her expression was blank. It was as if she had lost her mind. My first kiss was given to him. As if even she couldn't believe what had happened, Mira stroked her lips. After a long while, she embarrassedly held her red cheeks and softly cried out. What did I do, Just as he finished speaking, a voice full of doubt came from behind Mira. What did you do? Wah! The sudden voice made Mira, who had a guilty conscience, scream out loud. Ah! The newcomer seemed to be startled by Myra's sudden scream and also let out a scream. Mira hurriedly turned around and looked behind her. Then, she panicked and stuttered. Lasana. It's me. Lisanna patted her little chest and stared blankly at the panicked and blushing Mira. Sister Mira, what's wrong? Why did you suddenly scream? Nothing. Mira took a few steps back and laughed ingratiatingly. Her voice was a little hoarse. Lisanna, when did you come? Just now. Lisanna looked at her sister with a puzzled expression. What's wrong? No, this. Mira began to fidget. Did you see anything just now? See what? Lisanna looked more and more puzzled. Should I have seen something? Hearing this, Mira silently breathed a sigh of relief and gradually returned to her original calmness. Sister Mira. Lisanna stared at Mira and puffed out her cheeks. Are you hiding something from me? Ahaha. Mira guiltily looked away. How could I hide something from you? Right? How suspicious. Lisanna stared at Mira, causing Mira to feel even more guilty. She unconsciously reached out her hand and covered her mouth. Lisanna was momentarily stunned. Then, as if she had thought of something, she hurriedly turned her head and looked at Noah, who was sleeping on the table. When she saw that Noah's lips were moist and swollen, Lisanna's eyes widened and she looked at Mira in disbelief. Sister Mira. Could it be that you? It's about time to wake him up. Mira frantically interrupted Lisanna and said embarrassedly. Lisanna, aren't you curious about what magic he learned? Then hurry up and wake him up. Lisanna pouted and tears welled up in her eyes. Sister Mira, you're too sly. Little did she know that Mira had just said the same thing. Chapter 45. An indescribable silence hung in the air of the huge library. Noah held a thick book in his hands, but his attention wasn't on it. Instead, he was looking forward, his eyes filled with subtle emotions. Across from Noah, Mira and Lisanna were sitting side by side, but they weren't as rowdy as they usually were. Upon closer inspection, one could see that their reactions were a little abnormal. First was Mira. Mira was no longer the violent girl she used to be. Not only did she look a little embarrassed, her cheeks were also flushed. While she was cute, this wasn't the Mira Noah knew. Lisanna was the complete opposite. While she was the youngest of them all, she was also the most mischievous and precocious. Today, however, she was acting like a child, sulking as if she was angry. This scene had been going on ever since Noah was woken up by the inexplicably angry Lisanna. Looking at the pair of adorable sisters who were abnormal from all aspects, Noah felt rather depressed. As a result, he couldn't concentrate on the book in his hand at all. Noah lifted his head from the book and looked at Lisanna. Humph. Lisanna snorted and turned her head away, still looking angry. Noah blinked and turned his gaze to Mira. Mira's shoulders shook in an extremely exaggerated manner, and her originally pink cheeks immediately turned red. She glared at Noah and called out in an extremely embarrassed manner. What? Do you want to fight? Noah was puzzled. It wasn't strange for Mira to look for a fight. What was strange was that when Mira said, "Do you want to fight?" in a domineering and vicious manner, what was up with her flushed cheeks and delicate version of, "Do you want to fight?" Noah really didn't know what had happened between the two sisters, so he decided not to think about it and asked directly. I say, are you guys hiding something from me? Hearing this, the white-haired sisters reacted differently. Mira shuddered and turned her head away with a guilty conscience. Lisanna, on the other hand, seemed even angrier. She even shouted at Noah. Brother Noah is a big idiot. The questions in Noah's heart almost broke through the sky. Could it be that this was the legendary young girl's heart that men couldn't understand? Then, if you have the time to chat, why don't you hurry up and find a spell that you like? Mira changed the topic uncomfortably. Don't you want to learn magic? Of course I want to learn. Noah felt that he wouldn't be able to get any answers even if he continued to pursue the matter. He could only sigh as he adjusted the spellbook in his hand. Aren't we looking for it? Seeing that the topic was finally back on track, Lisanna also gradually returned to her usual self. She tilted her head and asked. You've been looking for a whole night. Haven't you found a suitable one yet? Basically, all the magic books in the guild's library are here. Noah patted the books that were piled up like a small hill on the table next to him, looking helpless. But I've been looking for a whole night, and I still haven't found a suitable one. Is it that difficult? Mira muttered as she grabbed a book and flipped through it. It's just choosing a spell, not choosing clothes. Can't you just pick the most powerful, and most useful spell? It's not that the more powerful the spell, the better it is. For example, your receive spell is considered extremely ordinary, while Naz's Dragon Slayer spell is a precious lost spell from ancient times. But aren't you still much stronger than Naz? Noah used one hand to support his cheek as his tone became a little bored. That's why I chose to choose slowly. Otherwise, I would have gone straight to Grandpa. He definitely knows a lot of precious, rare, and powerful spells. In fact, Noah had also thought of using the method of self-awakening to learn magic. After all, self-awakening magic might not necessarily be the most powerful, but it was the most suitable for the target of awakening magic, and the most suitable for the target of awakening magic. However, it wasn't that easy to do this. There was a most crucial problem. And that was, Noah didn't know how to awaken the magic hidden in his body. Everyone's way of awakening their own magic was different. Mira, for example, awakened her receive spell after coming into contact with a demon. Alusha also learned her magic through self-awakening. And Alusha's way of awakening her magic, according to Alusha herself, was to strengthen her heart in a moment of crisis, and thus awaken her outfit-changing magic. Noah didn't know how to awaken his own magic. 90% of the world's sorcerers chose to learn magic on their own for this reason, and Noah naturally wasn't surprised. Moreover, what if the most suitable magic for oneself was not suitable for battle after awakening? The method of awakening magic was unknown, and the type of magic was also unknown. This caused 99% of the world's sorcerers to learn magic by themselves. Noah had already delayed his awakening for 2 whole years because of the problem of magic. Now that he could finally learn magic, he didn't want to pin his hopes on an unknown self-awakening. "Brother Noah, why don't you learn to receive spell, like us?" Lasana's eyes lit up as she suggested. "This way, we can use the same magic." Hearing this, Noah looked at Mira, but inadvertently saw a trace of anticipation in her eyes, and he scratched his cheek. "It's not that I haven't considered receive spell, but I'm not as special as Mira, who can accept the power of demons, so I've been thinking about it." Hearing Noah's words, Mira and Lisana opened their mouths at the same time, and just as they were about to say something, a loud sound interrupted them. Ding dong! Ding dong! Ding dong! Ding dong! It was a sound as loud as the bells in the church. As if it was some kind of festival, the loud sound of a bell suddenly rang throughout the entire fairy's tale, and even the whole of Magnolia. The sound was so loud that almost everyone in Magnolia could hear it. Before Noah, Mira, and Lisana could do anything, a huge commotion reverberated from the fairy's tale guild outside the library. "Kildas! It's Kildas! Kildas is back!" At the same time, Noah, Mira, and Lisana heard an alarm ring in the sky above Magnolia. Magnolia has changed to Kildas mode. Residents, please proceed to the designated location as soon as possible. As soon as the alarm sounded, Noah, Mira, and Lisana felt the ground begin to shake. What's going on? Noah stood up and looked at the books on the shelves that were trembling. Mira hurriedly pulled Lisana behind her to protect her. "Kildas!" The guild was still in an uproar. "Kildas!" Mira and Lisana looked at each other in confusion. "Who's Kildas?" Noah frowned and walked towards the door without saying a word. Mira and Lisana hurriedly followed him out of the library. When Noah, Mira, and Lisana came out of the library and went to the bar on the first floor of the guild, they saw a scene like this. All the magic shooters in the guild fell silent as if the commotion just now was all fake. Their gazes converged in the direction of the main entrance. Meanwhile, at the entrance of the guild, a figure was slowly approaching. Chapter 46. Almost in an instant, Noah held his breath and, like the people around him, focused his gaze in the direction of the gate. Even though he was inside the guild, Noah could clearly see what was happening outside. If there was a word to describe Noah's current mood, it would be shock. This was because Magnolia had cracked open. Magnolia, which originally had many buildings, was divided into 2 sides with the guild entrance as the dividing line. 2 thick walls were built to protect the buildings on both sides. As a result, there was a road leading from the outside of Magnolia to the entrance of the fairy's tale. Under such circumstances, the existence named Kildas slowly walked over from the opposite side of the road and stepped into the gate of the guild. He was a middle-aged man around 40 years old. Moreover, it was a middle-aged man who wore a dusty cloak. His chin was full of stubble, and he looked rather sloppy. Such a sloppy middle-aged man carrying a cloth bag walked in from the outside and appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Undoubtedly, he was just a sloppy middle-aged man, but Noah felt a strong sense of presence from him. Of course, what Noah cared about was not the strong sense of presence, but the factor that caused this sense of presence to manifest. Noah clearly felt it with his powerful senses. The body of this sloppy middle-aged man in front of him hid a power so powerful that it could defeat Noah in an instant. Noah subconsciously clenched his fists and his body tensed up as if he had entered a state of battle. He stared at the middle-aged man named Kildas. Kildas had just stepped into the guild entrance and only had time to look around. Then, he suddenly tilted his head in confusion and fixed his gaze on Noah. The members of the guild who wanted to greet Kildas also seemed to have noticed that something was wrong. They looked at each other and forgot to speak. Mira, Lisanna, Elusha, Naz, Gray, Karna, Elfman, and the other children of the same age seemed to be thirsty. Their lips became dry and they opened their mouths, but no words came out. In the air, a solemn atmosphere was spreading. Looking at Noah, who was staring at him with his body tensed up as if he was ready to fight at any time, Kildas suddenly smiled. His smile was very steady. It seems that there are some interesting people in the guild while I was away. But I'm not your enemy, so you don't have to be so wary of me, right? Kildas's steady and light voice spread throughout the guild, instantly dispersing the solemn atmosphere. Upon hearing Kildas's words, Noah was taken aback. Then, he realized that his actions were a little too intense. He took in a deep breath and slowly relaxed his body before bowing and apologizing. I'm sorry, my reaction was too intense. You don't have to take it to heart. Kildas's serious expression turned into a frivolous and exaggerated smile, and then he then asked curiously, compared to that, I'm more curious about why you're suddenly wary of me. Because you're very strong. Noah replied without hiding anything. I can feel that you're very strong. If you were to attack me, I'm afraid that you could defeat or even kill me in an instant. Hearing Noah's words, Mira, Lisanna, and Elusha, who were of the same age as him, revealed astonished expressions. On the other hand, the magic shooters in the guild took it for granted. So that's why you're suddenly wary of me. You're afraid that I would attack you. Kildas was stunned at first, but he soon burst into laughter. That's interesting. Hey! At this moment, Naz jumped out and pointed at Kildas arrogantly. Who are you? Me. Kildas pointed at himself and grinned. My name is Kildas, and I'm also a sorcerer from Fairy's Tale. Fairy Tale sorcerer. Mira, Lisanna, Elusa, Elfman, and the others all looked at each other in bewilderment. Kana. Noah, on the other hand, cast his gaze to Kana, who was standing at the side, and asked this senior, who was the first to join Fairy Tale among the children of the same age. Do you know him? However, Noah did not get a response. Because Kana was staring blankly at Kildas, who was standing at the door. She did not say a single word and looked absent-minded. Seeing this, Noah pushed Kana's shoulder in a daze. Kana. Ah! Kana exclaimed softly. When she came back to her senses, she forced a smile on her face. What? What's wrong? Didn't you hear what I said? Noah was puzzled. Are you not feeling well? No. I'm fine. Kana quickly brushed it off. What did you just say? I want to ask you, who is this person? Noah could only suppress his doubts and ask again. Why did Magnolia suddenly have such a change? Are you talking about Kildas? Kana looked at Kildas again. Noah did not know if it was an illusion, but he felt that Kana looked at Kildas with a complicated and special gaze. He's the strongest sorcerer in Fairy Tale. The strongest magic shooter in Fairy Tale. Noah was surprised. You mean, he is stronger than Grandpa? I don't know about this. Kana touched her head embarrassedly. After I joined Fairy Tale, Kildas has been known as the strongest magic shooter in Fairy Tale. As for whether he is stronger than the president, only the president knows. Then, why did Magnolia become like that? Noah turned his head and looked at Magnolia, which had been split in half to create a path to the fairy's tale. Is it because of Kilda's? Yes. Kana nodded heavily. Because the magic that Kilda's used was the superior grade destruction magic crush. Noah's eyes suddenly became cold. There were thousands of magic spells in the magic world. Some of them were ancient magic that had been passed down since ancient times and developed by the ancestors. Some were lost since ancient times, and only a few people had the luck to learn the lost magic. Chapter 47. With the return of Kilda's, the magic shooters of Fairy Tale were in an extremely excited state for the whole day. It was not only because Kilda's was the strongest magic shooter in Fairy Tale, but also because Kilda's was usually wandering outside and rarely returned to the guild. Sometimes, Kilda's would spend a lot of time on extremely difficult missions. Sometimes, Kilda's just wanted to travel outside and train himself while living the life of a wandering hero, so he spent a lot of time in other places. Everyone knew that the strongest magic shooter in Fairy Tale was a person called Kilda's, but Kilda's rarely appeared in the guild. Naturally, when he returned, everyone became excited. Not to mention, the magic that Kilda's used was the superior destruction magic, Crush. Therefore, even if he was just passing by Magnolia, it would still cause a big commotion. Fortunately, Kilda's did not stay in the guild for too long today. After seeing that Makarov was not in the guild, he left a sentence, "I'll come back tomorrow," and left directly. Following Kilda's departure, the guild gradually returned to its original state. However, the guild was still in an excited state, which made the children of Noah's generation who were not familiar with Kilda's very curious. That guy is the most powerful sorcerer in Fairy Tale. If I beat him, I'll be the strongest, right? The hot-blooded Naz spat out flames and rushed out of the guild after saying this. Idiot. Gray, who joined Fairy Tale only a few years later than Katrina, was also not familiar with Kilda's, but he had more or less heard of Kilda's rumors. He sneered at Naz and sat on the side, chatting with others. He even took off his clothes. Kilda's. Alusha pondered for a while and then walked out of the guild with a determined expression. She must have been stimulated by Kilda's and decided to use him as a target to strengthen her training. A man among men. Elfman mumbled. Elfman muttered these words with a longing look in his eyes. It seemed that he had taken Kilda's as his idol. Katrina stared blankly at the direction Kilda's left and did not say anything for a long time. I don't know why everyone is so excited about such a big uncle. This was Myra's vicious and disdainful comment. He's quite manly, but very sloppy. Are all boys like that when they grow up? This was the sigh of the mischievous Lisanna as she blinked her big eyes. Noah was the only one who glanced around at his companions before he quietly left and walked towards his room. Phew, lying on his bed, Noah slowly exhaled and closed his eyes, sinking into silence. To be honest, the appearance of Kilda's not only stimulated Alusha and the others, but also stimulated Noah. With extraordinary senses, Noah clearly knew how powerful Kilda's, the strongest magic shooter in Fairy Tale, was. Noah had only felt such a strong sense of presence and power from one person so far. Makarov. In other words, as the strongest magic shooter in Fairy Tale, even if he was not as strong as Makarov, he was definitely at the level of the 10 great Saint Magi. Noah really did not expect that there would be such a powerful existence in Fairy Tale. Kilda's is definitely an S-rank magic shooter. S-rank magic shooter. That was a title that only magic shooters who passed the internal test of the guild and were recognized by the guild's president could have. In the Fiori Kingdom, as long as it was one of the top guilds, there would be at least 1 or 2 S-rank magic shooters. Due to the differences in the internal tests of each guild, the strength of the S-rank sorcerers in each guild was also different. However, even in the Phantom Lord, which had a large number of people and many branches, the number of S-rank sorcerers did not exceed 5. Fairy Tale's S-rank magic shooters test was notoriously difficult. Until now, Noah had only heard of S-rank magic shooters in the guild, but had never seen one. Today, Kilda's appearance made Noah certain that he was definitely an S-rank magic shooter in Fairy Tale. Grandpa always forbade me from going to the second floor, saying that there were extremely difficult missions that only magic shooters who were recognized by him could take on. In the past, I did not know what level I had to be considered as being recognized by Grandpa. Could it be that I have to be at Kilda's level? Noah sighed. Looks like I'm still far from it. Noah did not know that his thoughts were preconceived. The second floor of the Fairy's Tale was only accessible to S-rank magic shooters in the guild, and only S-rank magic shooters could accept quests from inside the Fairy's Tale. The S-rank magic shooters in Fairy Tale were very high, but how could it be so high that only people who had reached the level of the 10 great saints could become one? Kilda's had undoubtedly reached the level of the 10 great saints, so it was natural for him to become an S-rank magic shooter. Noah equating Kilda's, a 10 great saints, with an S-rank magic shooter was somewhat wrong. However, this did not hinder Noah's next decision. Reaching out, Noah looked at his palm that was facing the ceiling and clenched it tightly. The problem of magic has to be solved as soon as possible. With that said, Noah couldn't help but have an idea in his mind, and it got out of hand. At this moment, there was a light knock on the door, and Lysana's little head poked in. Seeing Noah lying on the bed and staring blankly at the ceiling, she faintly sighed. "Big brother Noah, why did you suddenly leave? You made me look for you for so long. What's wrong? Are you hungry?" Noah did not even turn his head as he casually replied. "Sorry, Lysana, I can't eat with you today. I'm thinking about some things. You can eat with Mira and the others. It's morning now, and I've already eaten breakfast. I won't be hungry so soon." Lysana walked over angrily and slapped away Noah's clenched fist that was facing the ceiling. She then put her hands on her waist. "Big brother Noah, I find that you're getting more and more annoying." "Huh?" Noah looked at her with a puzzled expression. "I don't think I've done anything to annoy you, right?" "You have. You have." Lysana's eyes were starting to moisten. "Big brother Noah, do you not like me anymore? Where did this come from?" Noah hurriedly got up and looked at Lysana, who was about to cry at any time. He felt a headache coming on. "Lysana, don't cry. As long as you don't cry, I'll do anything." "Really?" Lysana secretly glanced at Noah with teary eyes, her eyeballs rolling. Then close your eyes." Noah immediately closed his eyes. The next moment, an extremely soft touch covered Noah's lips, causing him to frown slightly. However, he did not suspect anything and continued to close his eyes. Hee. After a while, the soft touch disappeared and Noah heard Lysana's laughter. When he opened his eyes, he saw her blushing face, but she looked extremely happy. "I'm even with big sister Mira." After saying that, Lysana skipped out of Noah's room. Noah scratched his face. What's going on? Chapter 48. The next day, it was the second day after Kilda's return to Fairy's Tale. Noah got out of bed, put on the clothes that Lysana had chosen, and went to the bar on the first floor of the guild with Lysana. Lysana wanted to hide behind Noah as soon as she went downstairs. After all, Naz and Gray would pounce on Noah for a duel every time this happened, and then they would be dealt with by Noah. Lysana didn't want to be implicated in this process. However, Lysana soon discovered it. Today, Naz and Gray didn't pounce on Noah at all. Instead, they sat at a wooden table. Naz, who was sitting there, was hugging his arms with tears in the corners of his eyes. He looked angry, and there was a bump on his head. Gray was making fun of Naz, which made Naz very angry. His eyes became more and more moist, and he looked like he could cry at any time. Beside Naz and Gray, Mira, Alusha, Kana, Elfman, and the others were also there. They looked at Naz, who had a bump on his head, and seemed to be scolding him, which made Naz a little dejected. What's wrong with Naz? Noah naturally noticed this phenomenon and felt a little strange. Could it be that he went to challenge Mira or Alusha in advance and was defeated? The two looked at each other and walked in the direction of Naz. Hey, Sister Mira. Lisanna pulled Myra's hand and asked curiously. What's wrong with Naz? Lisanna. The moment Mira saw Lisanna, she glanced at Noah without a trace and then snorted coldly. He deserves it. Naz seems to have gone to duel with Kildas. Alusha spread her hands and said helplessly. In the end, you saw it too. This simple sentence made Noah and Lisanna immediately understand, and they laughed bitterly at the same time. Should I really say as expected of Naz? It's really Nazi style. No matter what, the opponent is still the strongest magic shooter in the guild. How could this bastard succeed? Gray held his head in his hands. Even Noah said that Kildas is very strong enough to defeat him in an instant. You can't even defeat Noah, how can you defeat Kildas? No matter what, this opponent's level is too high. Kana sighed and then pointed at Gray as if nothing had happened and reminded him. And Gray, where are your clothes? Oh. As usual, Gray was slow to realize that he was only wearing a pair of shorts. Hey, Noah, is that Uncle Kildas really that strong? Elfman asked Noah in a surprised tone. Strong enough to defeat you in an instant? Everyone present turned their eyes to Noah, and their eyes were filled with the same surprise as Elfman's. At the same time, they were full of doubts. It couldn't be helped. These juniors didn't know what kind of strength Kildas had. But they knew very well what kind of strength Noah had. Even if he didn't know magic, Noah still relied on his excellent swordsmanship, and his strength was comparable to the strongest among them, Mira and Alusha. Even if Naz and Gray joined forces to sneak attack Noah, Noah could still defeat Naz and Gray in an instant. They believed that even if Noah was compared to the magic shooters in the guild with real strength, he would definitely not lose out to them. Therefore, even Naz, who had been defeated by Kildas, and Kana, who seemed to have a strange attitude towards Kildas, doubted that Noah would be defeated in an instant. Mira, Lisanna, Alusha, Gray, and the others who had a good relationship with Noah were even more suspicious. In front of everyone, Noah shrugged. I can only say that Kildas is really strong. If he gets serious, I definitely won't be able to hold on for a second. A second. Everyone's eyes widened to the maximum at the same time. At this moment, a voice sounded from the side. Yo! You're still so energetic today. Hearing this voice, before anyone could react, Naz had already jumped up. Kildas. Kildas, who had not changed his attire at all, had a sloppy face full of stubble. He greeted the surrounding guild members while walking towards the group of children. Seeing Kildas walking towards them, the group of young boys and girls began to feel a little nervous. Only Noah and Naz, one was sizing up Kildas, and the other was shouting excitedly. Kildas! Let's continue our duel. Duel? Kildas touched his head and waved his hand with a look of disgust. Sorry, let's talk about it next time. Okay. Although he said okay, Naz had already moved his body and was ready to rush in the direction of Kildas. Idiot! Gray and Elfman pounced on Naz and held him down, making Naz struggle and shout. Let me go. Let me go. I want a duel with Kildas. You bastard. Kildas was helpless. So impulsive, is he really a young man? Isn't this good? Alusha, who had been sizing up Kildas with a scrutinizing gaze, smiled coldly. Since Naz has so much fighting spirit, it's not bad for you to accompany him, right? No, I just came back not long ago, and I haven't rested enough. Kildas still waved his hand with a perfunctory look. Naz, who only knows how to be straightforward, won't have any advantage in dueling with me, so let's forget about it. Hearing this, everyone nodded one after another. The strength of Kildas was unfathomable. If one wanted to challenge such an existence, one would have to use roundabout tactics and strategies when one's own strength was at a serious disadvantage. Only then could one have a pitiful chance of winning. For someone like Naz who only knew how to charge forward, it was needless to say, no matter how fiercely he charged, he would just be sending himself to death. The pitiful chance of defeating Kildas was directly reduced to zero. Therefore, everyone could understand the meaning of Kilda's words. However, the development of the next moment was beyond everyone's understanding. Then, Noah raised his head and looked at Kildas with a provocative smile. How about I fight with you? Noah. Everyone was shocked. Kildas was also stunned. Looking at Noah, the lazy and sloppy expression on his face gradually disappeared and was replaced by the steady smile that he had when he first returned to the guild yesterday. Then I'll accompany you for a while. Everyone was stunned at first, and then they exclaimed at the same time. Come on. Instead of cheering, voices came from all around, more like joining in the fun. Noah, brother Noah. Mira, Lisanna, Alusha, Naz, Gray, Kana, and Elfman stood in the center of the crowd. Some of their faces were full of worry, some of them were full of seriousness, and some of them looked excited. It seemed that they were having more fun than Noah. On the other side of the human wall built by the magic shooters, Noah solemnly held a sheathed knight's sword in his hand and stared at Kildas, one hand still holding the hilt of his sword. Compared to Noah, Kildas had a relaxed smile on his face. Before we fight, let me ask you a question. Kildas chuckled. Why do you suddenly want to fight with me? Didn't you say that I can defeat you in an instant? Then you have to be serious. Noah maintained the most natural posture of drawing his sword and chuckled. And before you get serious, I think I can still exchange a few moves with you. Actually, I'm quite curious about the president's grandson. After all, his other grandson is your brother in name. Sooner or later, I'll have to admit defeat to him, right? Kildas gestured at Noah provocatively. So, let me see what you're capable of. Noah did not answer, but his grip on his sword tightened. Chapter 49. Big Brother Noah. Seeing that the battle was about to begin, Lisanna, who was most worried about Noah, could not help but shout. Be careful. Noah nodded slightly and turned to look at the relaxed Kildas. He slowly lifted his foot and stomped it down. Bang! A loud stomping sound came from under Noah's foot. Noah's body turned into a black shadow and rushed towards Kildas. Good speed. Kildas praised. He clenched his fist and directly raised it in front of himself. A layer of dim light was faintly shining on his arm. Clang! The black shadow suddenly stopped in front of Kildas and swung his knight's sword mercilessly towards Kildas's hand. The result was the sound of metal clashing. You're quite strong too. After blocking Noah's attack with his bare hand, Kildas's body trembled slightly. He laughed in surprise at Noah, who had taken a step back. Instead of attacking, he swung his arm. No way. In the crowd, Mira, Lisanna, and Alusha were all dumbfounded. He blocked Noah's attack with his bare hand. Noah also stared at Kildas's swinging arm. With his extraordinary sensing ability, Noah felt the mana covering it. To be honest, the mana covering Kildas's arm was not that exaggerated. At most, it was used to strengthen the hardness of his body. If it was someone else who used the same amount of mana to strengthen their body and blocked Noah's attack with their bare hand, their hand would definitely be chopped off. However, Kildas used the same amount of mana to strengthen his arm and block Noah's attack. Others might find it inconceivable, but Noah realized that something was wrong. Kildas didn't just use his mana to strengthen his arm. Noah could clearly feel that the mana covering Kildas's arm was compressed into a ball like water. This was the secret behind how Kildas was able to block Noah's attack with his bare hand. When ordinary people used mana to strengthen their arm, it was like using mana as water while their hand was soaked in water. This way, when someone slashed with a sword, the water would more or less create resistance, reducing the strength and threat of the attack. Not only did Kildas use magic to strengthen the hardness of his arms, he also squeezed the magic into a dense ball, directly compressing the water into ice. The result of this was that ice was able to block the slash, unlike water, which was only able to obstruct the slash and reduce its power. Noah had never seen such a way of using mana before, and it made Noah's eyes light up as he came to a sudden realization. So, mana could be used like this. Noah, who had a lot of understanding, glanced at the knight's sword in his hand, and his eyes flashed. Since Kildas could compress his mana and increase its density to strengthen his arm, then if he used the same method to cover his sword with mana, would he be able to greatly increase the sharpness of his sword? Thinking of this, Noah directly turned his thoughts into actions. The mana in his body flowed out continuously and gathered on the knight's sword in his hand. To be precise, it should be said that it gathered on the body of the knight's sword. Then, Noah used his superb control over magic power that he had trained hard for 2 years to control the magic power that covered the knight's sword. He compressed the magic power that flowed like water on the sword into a thin layer that was even thinner than the sword itself. Kildas, who noticed this, was really surprised this time. But before Kildas could say anything, Noah once again rushed out. His body shot out like a bullet from a gun, and the knight's sword in his hand rubbed against the air. In the sharp sound of the air breaking, he slashed towards Kildas. Kildas's gaze turned cold. He hurriedly raised his hand that was compressed with mana and blocked in front of himself. Clang! A loud sound, like the ringing of a bell, reverberated in the air. Kildas, who was at ease just now, actually took a step back in the sound of the bell. His eyes were full of shock as he looked at Noah. Kildas retreated. The magic shooters of fairy tales suddenly burst into an uproar. A 13-year-old child had forced the strongest S-rank magic shooters of fairy tale to retreat. Although Kildas was careless and didn't expect Noah to suddenly use mana in such a way, it was natural for outsiders to be surprised. As for Mira, Lisanna, and the others, their faces were full of joy. On the other hand, Noah, who had caused this scene, seemed to be immersed in it. His pupils gradually constricted. It can be even thinner and sharper. Muttering this sentence, the mana covering the knight's sword in Noah's hand surged and became even thinner and sharper. In fact, Noah even made the magic vibrate and rub against each other like a chainsaw. Ha! With a cold shout, the knight's sword in Noah's hand turned into a blur and swung forward like a storm, leaving behind streaks of dazzling sword light. His vision was filled with streaks of sword light in an instant, which made Kildas tremble. He quickly raised his other hand and used both hands to block in front of his body. Clang, 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 clang. In the center of the field, streaks of sword light fell on the pair of muscular arms. It was as if they were chopping on some kind of steel, and the sound of bells rang out continuously. It can be even thinner and sharper. Noah's gaze became sharper and sharper, and the knight's sword in his hand swung even more violently. The mana covering the sword was becoming thinner and thinner, and the friction was getting faster and faster, making the sword sharper and sharper. Perhaps, under such circumstances, Noah already had the ability to slash a house in half with a single slash. However, such powerful slashes only left white marks on Kildas's arm that was blocking in front of him. They couldn't even scratch the skin on Kildas's hand. What a shocking fellow. Yi Zichin sighed. Hiding behind his crossed arms, Kildas raised his head and looked through the streaks of sword light that formed a net and fixed his gaze on Noah's face. Then, he slowly raised the corner of his mouth. But this is not enough. After saying that, Kildas abruptly opened his arms. Bang! The streaks of sword light that were slashing towards Kildas's arms were like a spider web and were easily blown up by Kildas. However, Noah was not surprised when he saw Kildas's exposed chest. Instead, he was delighted. Now's the time. Wave-like magic power surged out of Noah's body and gushed into the knight's sword in his hand, pouring into the blade of the knight's sword. The knight's sword in Noah's hand emitted a strong light. Clang! Along with the sound of the sword, a comet-like sword light burst out from the space with a sharp sonic boom. It was like a meteor flashing by, and almost instantly arrived in front of Kildas. Kildas's expression changed and then froze. For the first time since the beginning of the match, he had a serious expression on his face. You're too naive. Lowering his body slightly, Kildas abruptly stretched out one of his hands and directly clenched it. A monstrous amount of mana surged out from his hand. Bang! Under the gazes of the crowd, the dazzling sword light turned into powder like a piece of dough when Kildas clenched his fist. Then, Kildas threw a punch at Noah's face, whose pupils had shrunk. Chapter 50. Dong! Along with a low muffled sound, the hearts of the surrounding onlookers also jumped fiercely. Soon after, everyone present saw it. Noah's small body was like a kite with a short string. His body flipped a few times in the air and flew out. Then, he landed heavily on the ground dozens of meters away, making a loud crashing sound. Noah, brother Noah. Mira, Lisanna, Alusha, Naz, Gray, Karna, and Elfman all exclaimed in unison as they ran madly towards Noah. Oh no! Even Kildas, who was still in the posture of swinging his fist, was shocked. I accidentally got serious. Brother Noah. Lisanna helped Noah up from the ground, her eyes almost instantly tearing up. Brother Noah. Brother Noah. Mira stood in front of Kildas, her body surging with extremely dark mana like ink. Her eyes and expression became extremely ferocious. I'll kill you. Alusha, Naz, and Gray also got into their battle stances and stared at Kildas in front of them. It seemed that they would attack at any time. Although fists and kicks had no eyes, it was inevitable that there would be some injuries in this kind of duel. However, looking at the power of Kildas's punch, it was possible that it could have blasted a rock. As for Noah, it would not be strange even if he died, since he had taken the hit with his head. No matter how much Fairy Tale valued her companions, no matter how much she shouldn't be hostile towards her own people, under such circumstances, everyone couldn't care less. No matter what, this is too much. Alusha said angrily. Do you want to kill Noah? Don't think that we will be afraid of you just because you are an S-rank archmage. Gray also surged with mana. It seemed that he was also very angry. If anything happens to Noah, I will not let you go. Kildas. Naz gritted his teeth. Watch me take revenge for Noah. Seeing that Alyssa, Naz, and Gray were surging with mana, and Mira was about to rush out with a face full of rage, Karna and Elfman were completely panicking. Say. Everyone. Elfman was at a loss for what to do. Cold. Calm down. Karna stood in front of everyone and opened her arms as if she was protecting Kildas. Wait. Everyone, calm down. Around them, the magic shooters from Fairy Tale also cast a reproachful look at Kildas. Just as Kildas was about to say something, Noah gently pushed her away and stood up. Everyone, don't worry. I'm fine. Noah, brother Noah. Mira, Lisanna, Elusha, and the others quickly gathered around Noah, as if they were going to take care of Noah. You're fine. Kildas was surprised to see that Noah seemed to be fine. You were hit by that punch and you're fine. If I was hit, something must have happened. Noah smiled bitterly and raised the knight's sword in his hand and stroked it. It helped me dodge your punch. It. Everyone's eyes were focused on the knight's sword in Noah's hand. That's a magic weapon, right? Kildas suddenly realized. You mean, it was the effect of this magic weapon that helped you dodge my punch? Yes. Noah nodded and held the knight's sword in front of him. This sword can control the distance at will. Control the distance at will. This was the effect that Noah's magic knight's sword had been hiding. As long as mana was infused into the sword, the wielder could control the distance at will. For example, if the distance was shortened, even if the wielder was some distance away from the opponent, the sword could still reach them. When Mira, Elfman, and Lisanna were in danger in the forest, Noah had used this effect to shorten the distance between him and the giant, saving Lisanna in time. Just now, Noah also took advantage of the moment when Kildas opened his hand and revealed a flaw to use this effect. He shortened the distance between him and Kildas to the limit and struck out with that stunning sword. After all, if the distance was reduced to 100th, the speed of the knight's sword would increase by 100 times and the force of impact would be 10,000 times greater. Moreover, Noah's sword also had the ability to negate the recoil, allowing Noah to strike with all his might at any time without worrying about being injured by the recoil. That was why the three siblings were cut in half by Noah's sword. Kildas had no choice but to get serious just now to block Noah's strike that had shortened the distance by 100 times, increased the speed by 100 times, and increased the force of impact by 10,000 times. On the other hand, as long as he used the magic knight's sword to extend the distance, he could make the opponent's attack miss and nullify the opponent's attack. Noah had used this effect to nullify Kildas's punch, allowing him to remain unscathed. Of course, Noah's magic knight's sword had its limits. The greater the distance that had to be shortened or extended, the more mana the wielder had to expend. Noah had magic that no one else could match, so this limitation was not a big deal. However, the magic knight's sword had another limitation. The distance it could control was 100 meters. Regardless of whether the distance was shortened or extended, it could only be 100 meters. In other words, if Kilda's attack could reach 100 meters away, Noah would not be able to nullify it. Luckily, Kildas only threw a heavy punch, which could only reach a distance of 2 to 3 meters. Noah was able to use the magic knight's sword to extend the distance and dodge the attack. This sword's magic effect is really rare. Kildas exclaimed and smiled at Noah. Well, it's good that you're fine. Oh right, do you still want to continue? No need. Noah shook his head and looked at Kildas. I only wanted to fight you because I wanted to see your magic. Magic? Everyone, including Kildas, was stunned. Superior grade destruction spell shatter. Noah looked straight into Kildas's eyes.